Welcome to another edition of the Motion Live, everybody. Hey, I'm Morris Lilienthal. For you guys that follow me on social media and that have interacted with me over the years, one of the things that I'm most passionate about is the health and well-being of children, and that our children deserve the best health and well-being and information and resources they can get. And that's what our show is going to be about today, is how our guest, his organization, provides resources to abused children here in Madison County, Alabama. And it's just a tremendous organization, and I'm really ashamed to say I didn't know a whole lot about it, and I'm glad that I've learned, and I want to share it with everybody out here. And our guest today is Chris Newlin. He's the executive director of the National Children's Advocacy Center, which is based here in Huntsville, Alabama. And they do tremendous work, and you're going to be blown away about all the services and things that they provide, not only locally, but what they're doing to educate others around the country and the world in this important area. So without further ado, let me kick it off and get Chris introduced so we can get dived right in. So our guest again is Chris Newlin. Chris is a graduate of Hendrix College in Conway, Arkansas. He's also a graduate of the University of Central Arkansas. He's a graduate of the Harvard Business School Executive Education Program. So he's a Harvard guy, so I'm not sure I'm not going to be able to hold up my conversation here. But seriously, he has over 22 years of working in children's advocacy centers. So he really knows this area, and he's very passionate about it. And he has provided training on child advocacy issues in over 30 countries. So this is a really topic that I think a lot of times doesn't get talked about, but needs to be talked about. And we need to know about the issues that are out there, the resources that are out there. And I'm glad to have Chris on to talk about these things. Chris, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing really good. Thanks so much for having me, Mo.
Well, it's my privilege. I really, folks that you're out there watching, I've known about the National Children's Advocacy Center, the NCAC, here locally, but to be frank, I didn't know a whole lot about them. And then when I got to digging in a little bit, and then Chris invited me out to tour the facility and give me some more information about it, I was really blown away about what they're doing as a resource for our children locally, and what they're doing to help other advocacy centers out there. And that's why I wanted to have Chris on today. So Chris, before we get started, folks, if you're watching the live show, please put questions and comments below. If you just want to give us a shout out, we'll try to get to any questions or comments. If you're sitting here now and you're watching the recorded show, we'll monitor the feed afterwards. And if you've got questions, we'll try to provide you resources or tell you someone you can contact to get more information about it. And lastly, this is such an important topic and issue, and the services that the NCAC is providing and other similar organizations around the country is providing. The word needs to get out there, and these organizations need to be spotlighted and supported. So you can do that really easily by putting a like and putting a share out there for us and letting us get the word out about what the NCAC is doing out there. Chris, I guess I want to start really our conversation with what you and I did just a couple of weeks ago when I came a few blocks over and toured the facility, which is kind of tell me a little bit. I think that the history of your organization is really, really important. And tell us a little bit about the history, how the organization got founded and why it was founded and what your mission is.
Thanks for having me on today, Mo, and I'm happy to share all about the work that we're doing, because I do agree it's a very important story to be told. For anybody who's on, if we think back to the early 1980s, there was a very different time in our country. Think about the kinds of shows that were on television, the kind of topics that were being discussed. We were only, we boycotted the Olympics in Moscow in 1980. There was a very different time in the life of our country, and one issue that was just coming up on the forefront was the issue of child sexual abuse. Around that time, it was before then. It had been a topic that nobody, really talked about publicly. It was supposed to be a private matter. You just don't talk about that kind of stuff. It's difficult, and so it was really a significantly ignored issue. And in our community, Bud Kramer at that time was not even the elected district attorney. He was working as an assistant district attorney in the DA's office here. He was working in cases where he was seeing that kids who had experienced sexual abuse were being re-traumatized by a system that should have been there to actually care for them, that they were having to go through, talking to the police, talking to DHR, talking to all these different people, going to all these different places. And by the end of it, they were more traumatized oftentimes by what the system had done to them than what the actual abuse was. And Bud said, this is just fundamentally wrong. We can't necessarily stop abuse from happening, but we sure are responsible for how we work together as a team. And the issue in the early 1980s was we didn't know how to interview kids. We didn't know how to have evidence-based treatment. We didn't know how to work as a multidisciplinary team. And law enforcement back then had a very negative view of DHR, and DHR had a very negative view of law enforcement. They did not work together. there was animosity and there was this real siloed approach, which only means that individuals, kids, and families were being treated in a very poor way. So Bud said, well, surely somewhere around the country, someone's doing something better. So he looked around the country. He was trying to find out what other people were doing, and everybody had the same experience. So Bud and a number of folks in our community, this community, said, we need to come up with a better model. This model we have is completely broken, and we need to have a better way of doing this. And they came up with this, and the group came up with this idea of, instead of children having to go lots of different places and talk to lots of different people, some who may have little or no training at all, why don't we have kids come to a more child-friendly setting where all the professionals who need to be involved will be there, we'll work together as a team, and we'll do the right thing for kids, knowing that every case is a little bit different. So this idea, there was a chance taken, a lot of audacious people, said, let's try this, let's do it. There was a building that was provided by actually a local attorney for the first CAC to be located. And we started off on this journey, and quickly people around the country began to see what was happening in Huntsville, Alabama. People began to say, wow, that's a really cool idea. Is it working? How's it working? And it works. It takes a lot of work to get DHR and law enforcement and the prosecutor's office and medical professionals and mental health professionals, all those parties involved, to work together as a team, saying we're going to do the right thing for kids and we're going to share and work together as this team. Takes a lot of work, because it's easier to work by yourself. It's easier to go to dinner by yourself. I just have to figure out where I want to go, and I go. I don't have to talk and discuss whatever. But the impact for the children and families that we work with is where the impact really was. So if you fast forward, that's where we got started. You fast forward now, there are more than 1,000 child advocacy centers in the United States that last year saw over 365,000 kids. So imagine that every day 1,000 kids walk through the door, new kids walk through the door of a CAC in the United States. It has revolutionized our nation's response to child abuse, how we respond. In the last 20 years, child sexual abuse has declined nearly 50% in the United States of America. And these programs are also being replicated in more than 35 countries around the world, with more trying to come on board. So Huntsville, Alabama is the epicenter of this model, where it started. And people around the world know Huntsville, Alabama, not because of missile defense, not because of Redstone Arsenal. They know it because that's where the CAC model started, that now is being implemented worldwide. So obviously we can talk more about it, but as far as the history, Bud Kramer's leadership as the DA and then serving in Congress was overwhelmingly impactful. But there are literally hundreds of thousands of heroes that work in these programs around the country that are making a huge difference in the lives of kids. And one last thing, Mo, I'd share. Every single research study that's ever been done about this model has found positive impacts, not just on outcomes for cases, faster charging decisions for police, higher prosecution rates, better mental health outcomes, but because we eliminate the duplication of government activities, we actually save about $1,000 per case. So we're saving $1,000 per case, plus we're having better outcomes. So as Jeff Sessions said to me one time, he said the CAC model is the best example of a public-private partnership our nation's ever seen.
That's awesome. That is really awesome. And the cool thing is that you're impacting so many lives positively, and you're making a difference. And the neat part is that until you educated me on this a few weeks ago, and I'm wanting to educate others, that pretty cool that it started in Huntsville and that you guys are still leading the way in these efforts. But what I take away from that, and as a lawyer, and we're always wanting to try to dive into things and investigate things and do, and then understand when an alleged crime has been committed, when there's someone reports a case of potential child abuse or sexual abuse, that I can see where everybody kind of dives into their own individual world and starting investigating this thing, and everybody's looking into it from those angles, but really not looking at it from the child's angle. What's in the well-being of the child, whilst trying to accomplish the end, which is trying to find out the truth. And if someone's responsible, they need to be held accountable for that. But talk to us, you kind of just mentioned on it a little bit, but you took me through it a little bit more in detail when I came through to do a tour about the collaborative efforts and how that when a case is reported, what your organization does and how it works hand in hand with local law enforcement, child protective services, and other organizations to make sure that when the child is brought in, they're in a child-friendly environment, but they're handled in a manner that's going to elicit the best mental things for them and look out for their well-being, but also try to get to the truth as well.
Yeah. Just step away from that for just a second to provide some
Sure.
context. Most criminal behavior, we know a crime was committed. We just have to figure out who did it. For example, if my house gets broken into and I get home today, if the back door is kicked open and my big screen TV's off the wall, I know somebody broke in and stole my TV. And I just need to figure out who did it. Okay? It's the same with murder. It's the same with drugs. It's the same with most of those almost all criminal behavior. We know a crime was committed. We just have to figure out who did it.
Right.
In child sexual abuse, especially, it's a crime that we don't know whether it happened. Our cases begin most commonly with a child who makes an outcry to somebody, says something, maybe intentional, maybe not even intentional, maybe just says, I don't like Uncle Jimmy because he's mean to me. And that kicks off, that's how they initially disclose. So we have to understand that everything is tilted against finding out the truth in child sexual abuse cases. We typically only have two people who know what happened. The offender and the child. So and the offender isn't going to admit typically that they sexually abused the child. So that means that it's on the child, the only person in the entire world who can tell us what happened. Additionally, we have sometimes these children are traumatized. They may have some developmental issues, or they may just be young and have a limited vocabulary. Also, there's rarely medical evidence. Most sexual abuse is not about sexual violence like force and coercion that way. It's about trickery and manipulation, and it's not violent. It's typically less violent, but it is nonetheless very inappropriate and can be highly traumatizing for kids. So that's the context. There's no test we can give to an offender to say they meet the profile or that they did it. There's rarely medical evidence. We have one person in the world who can tell us what happened. So how do you possibly investigate this and find out what happened? Well, what we do is whenever there's a report to law enforcement or child protective services here of an allegation of sexual abuse, severe physical abuse, or kids who are maybe witness to violence like murder, and they're the only one who can tell us what happened. As soon as those reports are made, law enforcement and DHR contact us. They contact the National Children's Advocacy Center and they say, we need to set up a forensic interview. Forensic interview is typically where most cases start, and that is where we have one of our specially trained interviewers who conducts the interview with the child, and it's recorded, and it's being observed by a law enforcement investigator and a DHR investigator who are responsible for looking into it. Now, law enforcement is looking at it from the perspective of, hey, was a crime committed here, and if so, who did it? DHR is looking at it from the perspective of, is this child safe? Are they in a safe environment? Are there other children who might be at risk? So they have similar but slightly different focus that they need to attend to. So that's why it's important to have both of them there. So that interview is done by our staff. While that interview is being done, the caregiver is supported by our family advocate, and as a result of that forensic interview, helps guide the rest of the investigation. Also, we provide medical exams for children when there's allegations of abuse. Not because there's very often evidence, but a lot of times there may be other medical issues, or one of the dynamics of child sexual abuse is that kids sometimes feel that their body's damaged, they'll never be the same. So knowing from a medical professional who's an expert in this issue that their body's okay can be very reassuring and relieve a great deal of stress kids have. At that point, the child is done with the investigative portion of the case. They've done, kind of what's needed. We don't need to put them through talking to lots of other people and doing other stuff. They're done with the investigation, and the investigators can pursue their investigation based on what's been done there. At that point, we immediately turn our attention to having that child seen by our therapist, and the children being able to be seen and by any one of our 8 therapists who provide evidence-based treatment. At any one time, we have well over 100 kids in therapy here. Last year, we provided over 3,000 hours of therapy for kids here to help them heal. Just yesterday, we had a 6-year-old who experienced some very difficult things who graduated from therapy. It happens all the time. The kids are getting better. I think, Mo, that's one of the other things I think it's important to share. A lot of times people catastrophize child sexual abuse. They say, oh my God, her life is ruined. She'll never be the same. That is absolutely the wrong message to send. This is not a death sentence for people. It is not the end of the world. We have services that help kids get better, and our kids get better and they go on to live very productive lives. In most of the cases. And, there are tragedies that occur, yes, but we have services that help. So we do interview, we do medical exam, we provide family advocacy to support them, we provide therapy, and all those services are provided right here in one setting. So kids don't have to go all these different places. They come to one place. And they're able to feel very comfortable here, and it feels very, very much in a way like somewhere that it's very okay to go. It's scary for kids. It's scary for parents, but it's not going to get better by putting our head in the sand. But we can help families take that journey to health and happiness.
Well, it's such important work, and the way that, and I know I can imagine at the beginning when this was set up, the model was set up in the 80s and early 90s, trying to get all of these different organizations who are generally on the same team, but are maybe looking, as you said, from a different angle, trying to get them to collaborate and work together and to put aside some of their viewpoints and way things should be handled. I can imagine was very, very difficult. But now that you have that you're working together, what a benefit for that child to try to get them back on the right track, to give them the resources, treatment that they need. So this does not become a life sentence for them, as you said, so they can move on and move past this and can live a very productive and healthy and happy life. And that's huge. I mean, to me, that's just as important as anything else out of it.
Well, one of our historical problems is that this lack of a coordinated system was causing what we call system-induced trauma. Kids had not only experienced the trauma of what happened to them, they were experiencing this additional trauma. It would almost, in many cases, sometimes be better if we did nothing, like the way we used to do it. But in this model, I guess, the multidisciplinary team is a tricky thing. You still have people that have different work cultures they come from, different belief kind of perspectives, and bringing that together, it's just like a marriage. A marriage doesn't stay together by accident. It stays together because you work at it. And, same with a team. A team stays together because we work actively to help make sure every single day that I'm here on campus, I will spend at least some time in our team building. That's where we have Huntsville Police Department, Madison County Sheriff's Office, Madison County DA's Office, Crisis Services of North Alabama. They're co-located with us here. So this is where they come to work. Homeland Security Investigations for North Alabama. I mean, today I talked with all of them at different times because it's about helping make sure we're working together, we're communicating, we're connecting where we need to connect, looking for opportunities for collaboration, making sure that every case is handled in the same way, and that is, what would I want if it was my child?
Yeah, yeah. Folks, if you're just joining us, welcome to the Mo Show Live. Our guest today is Chris Newlin. He's the Executive Director of the National Children's Advocacy Center based here in Huntsville, Alabama. We've been talking a lot about the intervention program that they set up here when there's been a report of child abuse or sexual abuse, and how his organization works with various organizations to make things happen and look at it from a perspective of what's in the best interest of the child. And now what I want to kind of focus on now, Chris, and kind of shift the conversation a little bit is, not only do you guys work on intervention services and programs, but you guys do a lot of preventative, because certainly, it's going to happen, but as you mentioned earlier, that over the years, the number of cases have gone down by 50%. Let's talk a little bit about how we're getting there and how we can work to get it down even more. Talk just a little bit about a couple. I know you have a lot of programs, and we probably don't have enough time to highlight all the wonderful programs you have here in this short interview. But can you highlight a couple of the ones that you won't think that our viewers need to know about, some of the resources that you're providing here locally that maybe some of the other centers around the country are providing?
Well, and in some context, really, Mo, we view everything we do as prevention. The kids who have been a victim, we want to prevent them from being abused further. We want to prevent them from having long-term sequelae of the abuse. We want to prevent that offender, if they did do something, from doing it again. So,
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I didn't mention is we want the truth. If something didn't happen, we want to know that as much as if something did happen. We're not here on a witch hunt. This is about trying to find out factual information. Uh, so we have more cases where there's no criminal charges than there are cases with criminal charges. I'll say that.
Uh-huh.
So on our prevention cases, um, we recognized soon after we were created that, it's great if we can have this great system to respond, but wouldn't it be awesome if we like prevented abuse from happening? Wouldn't that be so much
Right.
better?
Right.
And so ultimately our business goal is to go out of business, where we're not needed. That's our ultimate business goal here at the NCAC. But our prevention programs, we are going into the public schools and we're doing sessions with third, fifth, and seventh graders, just talking about what is abuse. When I was a kid, we never had anything like that. When we talk about 1 in 10 kids are affected by sexual abuse, isn't this a topic we should be talking about in health class? I mean, it's affecting 10% of our population, and we talk about other things that affect far fewer than that. I mean, just think about it. Let me put it in context. Child sexual abuse occurs at 75 times the rate of childhood cancer.
Wow.
75 times more likely to be sexually abused as a child than you are to get childhood cancer. I'm not saying cancer is not bad. Being a cancer survivor myself, I'm a testament to that it's a serious issue. But this affects far more kids are affected by this. So we're going into the schools and talking about what is it. Sometimes it's amazing after some of those classes, kids will come up to their teacher, every year and say, I didn't know what my uncle was doing was wrong. He told me it was okay. We just needed to keep it a secret. So we're educating kids a baseline of knowledge. We're working with at-risk families, Medicaid eligible first-time parents who are in challenging circumstances and helping them fundamentally change the trajectory of their child's life. And our newest program is what is called Stewards of Children, and it is training adults in our community about what is child sexual abuse, how can you be supportive, and it's a 2.5 hour training that we do where there's a lot of videos of survivors of sexual abuse that are talking, including Huntsville's own Margaret Holzer, who was the Olympian in the Athens and Beijing Olympics. She talks about her experience and what parents need to know. So it's really, really helpful training for how adults can respond effectively if an individual discloses they've been abused, and what they need to also be looking for. So we've trained over 1,000 people in our community already. Our goal, the tipping point, as we say, is going to be if we can train 35,000 people. Because once 10% of our population has had this training, we think it can make a huge difference in how we view this issue.
That's tremendous. And to know that you guys are out there not only when the crisis happens stepping in, but out there trying to prevent these things from happening. And I love the fact that you said that, hey, our goal is to go out of business. And
Yeah, and one thing, Mo, I want to share, every service that I've talked about so far is provided at no cost to any of the families or participants involved. We provide our services. There should be no financial barrier that stands in the way of a child being able to get the services that he or she needs or to participate in some of our prevention programs. So all of those programs are funded without any billing or payment by families.
that's tremendous. And a lot of times when people have a need for something, or there's a service, or if they have an illness or something, a lot of times people can't afford that and do it. You hear about people that maybe have an addiction issue and they can't afford the treatment that they need. And to know that when there's a crisis going on, or you're even better trying to prevent a crisis, you're trying to do some of the prevention programs, that these services are provided at no cost. That's awesome, because that takes a load off of that potential person's mind to say, hey, I've got this tragedy going on in my life. Now, how am I going to afford to pay for the mental health care that my child needs? And
Right.
That's just one less barrier that they've got. They've got enough on their plate as it is if they're coming.
I agree.
Real quick, so one of the things that I thought was really neat when I came out there, you were kind enough to take me on the tour, and you'll have a huge campus. It was really, really impressive. And you got a lot of great employees. I know you guys are very proud as executive director. You're super proud of all the employees you have, and that you guys have been recognized by Better Business Bureau and other organizations as one of the greatest places to work here in Huntsville. Although I'd say Martin and Beeson's a great place to work too.
Well,
But
it's not bad being second, Mo. You know.
that's okay. That's all right. I'm used to being third or fourth at my house. My wife, my son, and my dog are ahead, so that's okay. But one of the cool and neatest employees that I met out there was Wilson. Can you tell our audience who Wilson is and why he's such an addition to your organization?
Well, and well, first, thanks for recognizing our dramatic efforts to create a really healthy work culture here at NCAC. And I think you saw that just as you walked around and saw our employees. A lot of times people say, I don't see how you work there. I can never do that kind of work. And I'm surrounded by 63 heroes who are absolutely 100% dedicated to this and supportive to one another, and are engaged. We just watched a video yesterday. It reminds us that geese fly in a V formation because when someone's strong, the others can get some lift off of them, but those in behind are honking to remind, to encourage the person in the front. And that's exactly how our employees are. They're supporting one another, doing really challenging work. And our newest employee is Wilson, who is our only employee who has 4 legs. So Wilson is a facility dog, specially trained by Canine Companions for Independence. He is an absolute game changer. Wilson is specially trained. He knows over 40 commands. He's a golden retriever, black lab mix, but he looks like a black lab, who is the most calming presence you can imagine. We got him about 2.5 months ago. He's already been involved with more than 100 cases. And when kids are having an interview and they're scared to death and they're talking to this person about probably the worst thing that ever happened to them, they're not alone, because sitting right next to him on the couch is Wilson curled up, and they can just pet on Wilson and he will just be there to support them. And it has been phenomenal. We've had kids who were overwhelmingly, scared and intimidated, and Wilson's there and he makes a difference. So, but Wilson's good for adults too. So every Friday when we have our multidisciplinary team meeting, Wilson comes to the team meeting and he walks around and just a calming presence. He is phenomenal. And the research is overpowering to say that kids literally physiologically are less stressed when they have that Wilson in there in the interview with them or in a therapy session. He's just really, really calm. And, thank you so much to Canine Companions for Independence for approving our application. This is a model that's being implemented in CACs all over the country. It's being implemented in lots of settings, hospitals, other kinds of settings. But Wilson is a absolute gem, and he is so laid back, it's unbelievable. They actually described him as bomb-proof.
Well, that's awesome. I really was really tickled when I saw him there and hearing, just my love for animals and doing, but I can really see and appreciate what you're saying, that I can see that for the children that are there, having that dog, Wilson, there as a calming just entity and something that they can nestle up to and just instantly have a connection with when they're going through something and in an uncomfortable situation, as you said, most likely talking to someone about the most horrific thing that's probably ever occurred to them. And that's tough for somebody around your age to talk about something that's traumatizing. But when you think about it from a child's perspective, having that dog there as a comfort measure is just a game changer.
And we're hoping he's going to be able to, Mo, we're hoping that we'll be able to have him go to court too. When kids have to go to court, that Wilson will be able to accompany them, so that in that kind of novel setting that can be really intimidating, to have Wilson, who they know is going to be there, is something we're working towards.
That's really cool. And I would hope and think that our judges here across the street at the courthouse would be very receptive to that. One of the other things that I wanted to touch on before we get ready to wrap up, Chris, is something that I know that your organization is very passionate about, and as being a leader in the child advocacy space of education and training, and not only training locally here with programs like the Stewards of Children program, but actually training and working with other child advocacy centers around the country and really around the world. Talk to our audience a little bit about what you guys do and what resources you provide to others in training, and how that trickles back to actually fund your organization.
Thanks, Mo. It's a whole side of NCAC that I think our community doesn't really see as much, because it's not a service we're providing for Madison County residents. But since 1985, we've trained almost 150,000 professionals from all over the world. And every year we book over 5,000 hotel nights in Huntsville, right here, which has somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 to $4 million impact on our local economy. Which is pretty amazing as a nonprofit that we're doing it. And it runs our training activities run a bit more like a business because we're marketing and we have competitive pricing and we need to have a quality product. But we provide training. We provide somewhere in the neighborhood of 160 trainings per year, either here in Huntsville or throughout the world. And our business model is we do training, we generate revenue by doing the training, which helps keep us as a leader in the field, influencing people on the best practices out there. And then we use the proceeds of that training to help support our local services. So the reason is, and we benefit our local economy by bringing all these people to Huntsville, spending money in Huntsville and Madison County. So it keeps that wheel spinning. So it is, our training department is phenomenal. I think our training is recognized worldwide. We just are part of an application for a third round of funding to the European Union on providing training in Europe. I was just in Cyprus last month. Two of our employees a month before that were in Sweden. We're going to Greece later this year. We're all over the place, both domestically and internationally, providing training for professionals or having them come to training that we're hosting here. So we also have the world's largest digital library that focuses specifically on child abuse. It's called the Child Abuse Library Online, which connects frontline professionals with the latest research that there is, and it is an absolute game changer for our field that has helped bring in the role of research in what we do. We have online training so people can register and attend all that for free. So some of it is funded by federal funding, and then some we do on a kind of a for-profit basis.
Yeah. Well, and the most important part of as you shared earlier for people who may have just been joining us now, is that you're doing all these things to raise funds and you're getting grants, but there's no cost to any of the recipients of your programs. And anybody that is going through any of the intervention services or prevention services, those people don't have that barrier of a financial concern to get your services. And that is so important. Chris, I want to be mindful of your time. Folks, if you're just joining us, again, our guest today on the Mo Show Live is Chris Newlin. He's the Executive Director of the National Children's Advocacy Center, based here proudly out of Huntsville, Alabama. And they are a tremendous resource for abused children and families in an intervention side and in a prevention side and education, leaders in education in this area all over the world. And Chris, I guess if more people want to get information about what your organization is doing, and if they out to maybe have someone come train their organization that's working with children, for example, with the Stewards of Children program, is the best thing for them to go to your website? Is that probably the best resource?
We've got a really robust website, www.nationalcac.org. A tremendous amount of information on there, and if you don't find what you're looking for, whether it's about maybe participating in one of our events or receiving some training or how just to get some basic information that you can share, there's a plethora of information on there. But also on there, easily found, is our phone number. You can call us and we can have a conversation if there's something further. So there's volunteer opportunities, there's opportunities for training, there's opportunities just to get information, there's opportunities to get involved in maybe supporting our work. So yeah, I think the website's a great way, but if that doesn't work for you, we'll talk to you on the phone.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, what I'll do, folks, is after the show, right here below in the comments, I'll put a link to the CAC's website there. You can go through there and look through various information and services that they offer and a little bit more and do a little deeper dive there. And then I'll also tag you guys on social media and Facebook so they can follow you guys and see the important work and some of the services and understand about some of the things that you guys are doing to benefit our local economy and bring some attention to Huntsville in a positive light with your education and training. But Chris, I want to thank you so much, and you and all the other heroes that work there for all you're doing for our community and our children. Kids need to be protected. You guys are out there doing that work, and it's so important. And I'm really proud to know that this is going on and that it was founded and being spearheaded here in Huntsville, Alabama. So, Chris, thank you so much for your time today, and I really appreciate all you're doing.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and thanks for saying those kind words about our absolutely dedicated employees. Anyway, thanks so much for allowing us to participate.
Well, again, thanks, folks. Again, this was just a tremendously impactful conversation with Chris. And Chris, I think something that really touched me here at the end, I'll reiterate, I think you said it was a child is 75 more times likely to be a victim of child abuse than they are of childhood cancer. And that is just striking to me. So please like and share this video to get the word out about what the NCAC and other CACs around the country are doing. I think that's really, really important work. Again, thank you so much, Chris, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in.